What is going on, YouTube? My name is Dave Sarner, and welcome to another edition of the Rise and Fall Fantasy Football Show. Welcome to the Week 7 edition. Finally here, almost halfway through the season, or pretty much halfway through the season, making our way for our playoff pushes now, and now we're starting to determine in our fantasy leagues, guys, who's going to make it and who's not, who has a chance and who doesn't. If you guys are 0-6 or 1-5, or if you're 5-1 or 6-0, regardless, I'm going to help you out here today. We're going to try to figure out everything you guys need to know for your Week 7 matchups here with the bye weeks, with COVID. Who knows what the hell is going to happen here? So my goal today, we're going to break down every game as usual. I am riding solo again, and we're going to talk about every single player you need to know about, whether it's people that you need to pick up off the waiver wire or people that you already have that you think you might need to start now who may have stepped up last week. These are all going to be the players we're going to talk about today. We're going to dive through every single game, guys, every single player, and try to give you as much information to make the best decisions possible. But as always, before we do that, these episodes are being recorded Tuesday night going into Wednesday. So anything that does occur here, guys, from Wednesday morning on, essentially, assume that these videos in particular don't have that covered since we are recording beforehand. We don't have clairvoyance here. So unfortunately, we could only do what we could do with the information that we have. And I'm hoping that everything I can provide for you will still help you prepare in case for some reason something does happen and you need to make adjustments. So without further ado, let's get into the episodes for Week 7. So moving right along here, we have yet another divisional matchup with the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. I'm telling you, man, it's divisional week in the NFL, and I'm really excited to see these matchups. This one in particular should be a good one. We have this, two of the top ranked offenses in the league, two of the most dynamic quarterbacks, three of the most dynamic receivers, some really good running backs. It has everything that you want to be a really amazing matchup here. You have Russell Wilson. You have Kyler Murray. I'm not even going to step on really any of that analysis. There's no reason to go into that. They are going to be in your starting lineups. They're going to be who you're going to go with this week. If you have them at your quarterback position here, there's really no question that you're going to take them out of the lineups, right? On the other side of things, again, same thing with the wide receivers. Hopkins had a down week, but you're going to start him in a must-start game here. Reason being, Seahawks give up the most points to wide receivers. Seahawks give up the most points to wide receivers. Seahawks give up the most points per wide receivers. So, sure, DeAndre Hopkins, great option here. But maybe there's another guy on this team that might be worth a start as well in your lineups. And in case you guys aren't watching, what I'm kind of like, nudging towards is Christian Kirk. Christian Kirk, guys, exploded last night. I had him in a showdown lineup as my captain, so he did pretty well for me. Won me some money last night. 3 targets for 2 catches for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's not going to be that way every week, guys, but listen, this is the kind of week that you want to try to follow that up. Generally, we would say, no, you don't do that. Not a lot of volume. He hasn't been as consistently productive or involved. Well, that doesn't matter. This is Seattle, and like we said, they're giving up the top most points to wide receivers in the league. So you're going to do that all day, every day. I love DeAndre Hopkins. Christian Kirk is a good flex option this week. You're not going to go after tight ends. I don't care what the rankings are. And then at the same time, Kyler Murray, second ranked against quarterbacks is the Seahawks. You're going to start him. He should have a monster week for you as well. Kenyon Drake. Now, guys, I get it. 28 points. Oh my God. 20 for 164. 2D, like just popping off. Listen, that's such a deceiving day for him because he really, really wasn't having that amazing of a day until after. In garbage time, until that big run when it was literally trying to run out the clock. I don't trust Kenyon Drake still, even with the way that he played yesterday. This is a good matchup for him. It's a decent matchup for him. But I still think Chase Edmonds, I was wrong about Chase Edmonds this week. I'll admit that. Kenyon Drake had the better day. I think both of them kind of struggled overall. And then Drake saved his day in garbage time. But I think Chase Edmonds is still going to be the guy that you want on this football team. I just have a feeling. This week could be one of those weeks too, by the way. The receiving game is where I think it's going to be really turned up here for the Arizona Cardinals. In the running game, I think it's going to go through Kyler more again. And, listen, he averages like 74 yards and a touchdown a game. So you're going to rely on that. And just be mindful that 14th is not terrible, not great, but not terrible in terms of what they could do against running backs. Kyler Murray is going to take a lot of the volume, so you have to think that that's going to be even more of a downgrade from Drake, in my opinion. I just don't trust it this week, guys. I'm not going to buy the hype just yet. Let me see him do it again against what he should do in this matchup is kick their ass. And if he does that, I'm cool with that. Maybe then I'll be my tone or my tune will be sung a little differently next week when I'm talking about him. But for right now, I am not in on Drake. I have him still pretty low, even in a decent matchup. Chase Edmonds, I'm not going to have as high as I had last week, but I still kind of like him this matchup. He's a sneaky play for me this week. I'm not going to go out of my way to start him, but DFS lineups, I'm going to try him again this week and see how it goes. I think he's going to get more involved with this offense against this defense. Tight end, again, we're not going to start them. Arizona, you don't want to start any of the defenses in this game. It could be a tough one. Russell Wilson, you're going to start. DK Metcalf, you start. Tyler Lockett, you start. Now, they are tough against the wide receivers, so I do have those two guys in particular a little tick down this week. They're, I think I usually have them like top 8 for the most part. DK Metcalf's been top 8 most weeks. Tyler Lockett, top 10 most weeks. But maybe Tyler drops a little bit out of the top 10, maybe top 15 this week. Could be vice versa on that one, but I do think that they are going to play it a little bit better. But let's be real here. I mean, I think the I think the Seahawks are going to come in and play this a lot better than what Dallas did last night. So I'm not too concerned with that, with the matchups for those two guys. In particular, like you said here, look, they're both having some really good years, 73 total points, 88, compared to, say, like a DeAndre Hopkins, who has 95 total points this year. So I really like these two in the matchup. You're going to stick with them. And then the surprising number 2 most productive fantasy player on Seattle is Chris Carson. Chris Carson, guys, not a terrible matchup. In fact, it's probably the best matchup of this entire Cardinals defense this week. However, we did see Zeke struggle last week. I think it was more to do with them and their offensive line here. So I think Chris Carson is going to have a more productive week for you. I do have him as a top 15 pick or top maybe 18 pick or something like that. As of right now, that could change. But I do like him. You're going to start him if you have him in what could be a shootout kind of matchup here. And even tight end. Listen, tight end, not the worst, not the best matchup. If you need to fill someone, Greg Olsen could be an interesting bye-week filler, but I'm really not going to go out of my way to tell you to start him. I don't think he's worth the effort this week in a matchup that has been pretty stingy against those areas. I think they're really going to try to... Now, granted, what I'm thinking here is 28th against wide receivers for Arizona, and they're, so this could be a DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett downgrade, if you will. And maybe that's where I see tight ends step up a little bit more, and Greg Olsen or so forth. Kenyon Drake, I'm a little bit hesitant, guys. He's not as high on my list. Listen, you're going to want to start him again, and don't be surprised when you put him back in your lineup. He actually underproduces and doesn't do it for you, and then you're mad at him again. So I would say if you have an option, you could put it over him. I personally would do it. I'm not going to go out of my way to start Kenyon Drake, even with the week. A lot of that was garbage time last week, guys, or yesterday, guys. So don't be like, well, he's a top producer. Yeah, okay, fine. That's not going to happen every week. Not at all. And it's not going to happen against a team like Russell Wilson, who are going to be putting up points early. Chase Edmonds, I do like in what could be a really big receiving battle here. Sneaky play again in DFS. Not in your main lineups maybe at this moment, but in DFS, and stash him on your bench. I like those options. DeAndre Hopkins, you start. I love Christian Kirk this week. I do think that he'll get more involved, even though it is, a tough matchup on the Seattle side. As we said, Cardinals have a great matchup against the wide receivers, or I guess in terms of against the corners of Seattle, rather. So you definitely want to start those guys. DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Kirk, love them. Not going to go out of the way for tight ends. So I guess the theme here is you go with your quarterbacks, you go with your 2 starting wide receivers on the Cardinals and Seahawks, and I am in on Carson, out on Drake. Easiest way to describe that. I'm not high on the tight ends. If I had to choose one, Greg Olsen would be the guy who's like 18th or 19th on my list. He'd be a deep sleeper if you had injuries and bye weeks or whatever. You should be able to get a better tight end somewhere. Next, we have a 425 game, guys. We're officially in the afternoon with that last matchup, and we start again with the next matchup here, the Jacksonville Jaguars against the Los Angeles Chargers. Man, I'm really excited for this matchup too. I think this is a really intriguing battle, and this is where I see a lot of fantasy production potentially from the quarterback position. Why I say that? Well, you look at the rankings here. The Chargers are giving up the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. The Jaguars are giving up the 7th most. So that's big time production value, or potential rather, for Gardner Minshew and Justin Herbert. Herbert's been going off as long as Keenan Allen's there and Justin Jackson's there and guys that he could pass to. I love Justin Herbert this week. I think he has a great matchup. He's a top 10 option for me. I think he's even top 8 this week, the way he's been playing. Minshew, by the way, also a top 12 option for me. He's a starter this week, especially if DJ Chark is going. I think I don't think he got banged up again, so I think he's okay. So you're going to start him. Chark's going to have a much better week, 14 targets. Listen, I know it wasn't the best value or best production this week from DJ Chark, but I'm not worried about that. 14 targets. He caught half of those for 745. They were obviously keying in on him. And Keelan Cole's been able to take advantage when that happens. And even Laviska Shenault to a degree. So I'm hoping that down the line, if they keep doing that teams are going to get burnt by, like, say, Keelan Cole and Laviska Shenault. That will keep it a little more honest for DJ Chark. Either way, though, 8 points, 745, not a terrible game. Again, the 14 targets I like. But let's talk about the other guy on this list. For weeks now, Matt and I talked about Laviska Shenault. And we were really off of Keelan Cole, as was everyone else. Keelan Cole every week was producing, and every week no one picked him up. In any of my leagues. I mean, I'm sure it was the same for a lot of you guys, and I'm thinking to myself, interesting. Now, I didn't need the value. I'm pretty strong at wide receiver, so I personally didn't need it. But I kept thinking to myself, like, I wonder why that is. Keelan Cole's leading the Jacksonville Jaguars in receiving yards, or receiving points right now from fantasy perspective. 67. He's third on the team in fantasy points. Okay? That's better right now in particular. I mean, there's a bye week, of course, but that's better right now than Keenan Allen. Okay? And now, again, that's 1 week. We're talking about a 1 week difference here, so Keenan Allen has one less week to work with, so I get that. It's not like it's a crazy thing, but Keelan Cole, right at this moment, having more fantasy points than Keenan Allen, that intrigues me. 17 points this week. He had 9 targets, caught 6 for 143. Seems to be the legit number 2 option. And as we said, Laviska Shenault's more of a gadget kind of guy to a degree. I don't think he has that overall value, although he's been playing pretty well. I just think that Keelan Cole is definitely the number 2 based on the overall fantasy points that we're seeing here on the season. So I do like Keelan Cole. I do like DJ Chark. This matchup is not terrible. As we said, a lot of points given up to Gardner Minshew and quarterbacks here from the Chargers. And they don't utilize their tight end, even though it's a great matchup for Tyler Eifert. I do expect Keelan Cole to come back and have a big day. I actually really like him in DFS and maybe even a flex position. He's been pretty damn consistent this week, and you can't just ignore that. And a guy who's going to throw the ball, who needs weapons, Minshew will be able to do that for you. Meanwhile, Minshew, solid, 17.862 points, 243. He had a pick, but he had the rushing touchdown and a passing touchdown. That's Gardner Minshew. That's going to be the minimum. If he can get you 17 to 21 points, 22 points a week, that's kind of what you expect from him at this point, right? James Robinson made his day worth it with the receiving touchdown, at least. He only got 16 carries, but the 16 carries turned into 50 yards. So nothing too overly impressive with Robinson this week in what should have been a really good matchup. So I'm a little disappointed, actually, with this overall 13.3. Usually I'm okay with that. It's not like Joe Mixon where he's like a first-round pick and he's getting me 13 points and doing this. James Robinson was like a 15th round sleeper that no one really knew about to a degree, and just happened to be the guy, right? And if you got him, and you're really excited about that. But so if he puts up things like this is kind of what I originally projected his value to be when I drafted him in my one league. So not too worried about this. I think it's still a solid game. It is a tough matchup this week, though, so I am a little down on him going forward into this week with the Chargers. It could be more. I have to think this is going to be more of a shootout. And if it's more of a shootout, that's not as good for James Robinson. Now, granted, tied Chris Thompson in targets, and he had the receiving touchdown, so his value is not going to go crazy down, because as we know, they're pretty decent against, the wide receiver position. But I'm not overly as high as him as I've been in that last couple of weeks. I think maybe we ground our expectations on him instead of being a top 15 option. Maybe he's really 16th, 17th on that list. Mid-tier RB2, I would say. So on the other side of things, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, the Los Angeles Chargers were on bye last week. The Chargers, obviously Justin Herbert, he's been fantastic since he's taken over the team. I'm really happy that they decided to go with Justin Herbert over Tyrod Taylor. Like we talked about on the show, it does suck for Tyrod. I get it, man. It wasn't something that you could control. Punctured lung on a anesthetic for your ribs. It's a tough thing to deal with, man. We get it. But the reality is, if you're a fantasy player, you know this already. You've seen it in previous years. Tyrod Taylor isn't exactly franchise material, right? He's just not that. And it's, it is what it is, man. It sucks for him, but Justin Herbert is their future. And if he's already showing those signs, take it from someone in Washington who already benched their first round pick from last year. You start that guy, you build around him, you let him develop. Especially when he's competing the way he's competing. Even if they are losing these games really close, he is putting them in these games to win, and the Chargers have done that even without him. So I don't think that's going to change these weird losses that they tend to get by like 2 points. I don't think Justin Herbert's going to make that difference in terms of make it any worse, right? It just seems like it's either that or he's winning, and he gives you the best chance to win. There's no doubt about that in my mind for the Los Angeles Chargers. On the other side of things, Austin Eckler's still out, so Joshua Kelly, Justin Jackson are going to get the bulk of the carries at running back. Now, we did see kind of a theme finally last week and really saw how they were going to kind of break this up, or 2 weeks ago rather, and that was really utilizing Justin Jackson. When I look at these two running backs right now, it truly feels like Justin Jackson is the quote-unquote Austin Eckler of this offense. Whereas if you look at Joshua Kelly and his style, he's really more of the Melvin Ingram. And that makes sense. When we saw at the beginning of the season, it was Joshua Kelly, Justin Jackson was hurt, but it was Joshua Kelly with with Austin Eckler. And Joshua Kelly was playing that Melvin Gordon role that he played, the runner of that two-headed backfield. Whereas Austin Eckler was kind of more of the receiving back. Well, that's kind of the dynamic here moving forward, if I had to guess, based on what the first couple seasons were like with Joshua Kelly and his role with Austin Eckler. And now, 2 weeks ago, with how the role was with Justin Jackson, it was very clear that Jackson was the quote-unquote Eckler in this offense. To me, that makes him much more valuable than Joshua Kelly. And it's funny because Joshua Kelly was the one that people were holding on to because he was getting 12 points here or there. Having a touchdown. He had like 60 yards and a touchdown 2 weeks in a row. So it's understandable, right? I get it. But at the same time, Justin Jackson is the one that you want in your lineup. He's the one that you want on your team if you're an Austin Eckler owner. And if you need to go out and trade for him, he hasn't done anything amazingly crazy just yet to warrant a big trade. Right now, it's just based on, the fact that he's taking over for Eckler and the volume that he could get. But you might be able to make a case to trade for him if someone has like just the one of them, not Josh Kelly or something. And maybe you have Josh Kelly and Eckler. Well, see if you guys make a trade for him, because that would be the guy that I would recommend having as the handcuff as a replacement right now for Austin Eckler. At the receiver position, there's another guy we need to talk about, and that is Mike Williams. I get it, man. Mike Williams, he had a great week 2 weeks ago. Probably one of his best performing games I've personally ever seen him play. And if you listen to my show, you know I'm not a huge fan of Mike Williams. And for good reason. He just hasn't really lived up to the hype of being a high round pick the way he was. He was supposed to be this like elite talent that was going to be a true number 2 in Los Angeles. And he has really not been on the field enough to do that. So with all that being said, I'm sure this week people are going to be like, well, you got to start Mike Williams. The Jaguars are giving up the 8th most points to wide receivers. So obviously they're like, well, you have to start them, right? You got to go to Mike Williams. Don't do it. All right. I get the intrigue. Unless you are decimated at receiver and he's one of your only starters and there's no one else on the waiver wire. Okay, I get that. But his consistency is not there. It's not there. He had this big game, great, but he might end up coming in and having 4 points for you in fantasy this week, because that's really more of where he's been consistent is the boom game, or the bust games rather. He has not had many of those boom games. And then injuries have just taken hold of his whole career. So I don't trust that either, that he'll leave the game with an injury next week. I personally need just a little bit more, production in the next couple of weeks for me to feel comfortable with Mike Williams. Keenan Allen, you're going to start. That's a different story. He is a great matchup this week. I do expect him to get like 15 plus targets this week. I do expect him to have big yards this week. He's going to be probably one of my top tier wide receivers. He's going to be high on my rankings, higher than he's ever been before, I think, this week. And then on the other side of things, the other position of pass catcher is the tight end. Hunter Henry's been consistent, but like low consistency. Nothing like he's not exploding for double digits every week in full point PPR, in half point PPR rather. I don't even think he's doing that in full point PPR all the time. So with all that being said, though, again, Jaguars are really bad, guys. Their defense is giving up a ton of points right now. We saw Hawkinson score last week against them with the Lions. We saw Kenny Golladay have a big day. We saw DeAndre Swift have a big day. So if I had to guess, Herbert's going to play this game, or the Chargers are going to play this game a little bit better than the Lions, in my opinion. And I really like Justin Herbert. I really like Justin Jackson. I love Keenan Allen this week, and I love Hunter Henry. I would even be as bold to say you might be able to throw in their defense, depending on who's back. If Melvin Ingram's back and stuff like that, then I might be a little in on this defense a little bit more, and Gardner might have a down day. Who knows? On the other side, I do like Gardner, though, in spite of what I just said. James Robinson, I think he'll be solid. He has a tough matchup, but I think he'll do some things in the passing game as long as he gets like 5+ targets. I think he'll give you some commendable points. DJ Chark, I think he's going to have a bounce back week, in my opinion. I do like Keelan Cole this week. He's a sleeper DFS pick. I love him in DFS this week. And he could even go into your flex if you needed for the bye weeks. And other than that, Joshua Kelly, listen, he has some value. I would say he's more of an RB4, RB5 because he might not get the passes. And Mike Williams, I am personally going to stay away from. But I understand if you're going to tell me I got to use him this week. Just remember my words when I say this last week was more of an outlier than the trend. Okay? More of an outlier than a trend. So with all that being said, guys, the top guys in this matchup, again, Gardner Minshew, DJ Chark I like, Justin Herbert love, Keenan Allen love, Hunter Henry love. I like Justin Jackson this week in a good matchup. 7th against running backs, the Jaguars are giving up, 8th against wide receivers. So Jackson should be a really interesting start. And I love DJ Chark as well. James Robinson, I don't love. And I am actually in on Keelan Cole this week. Next up, guys, we have the San Francisco 49ers and the New England Patriots. And of course, it's going to be the last of the 4 o'clock afternoon games, I believe, before we get to the night matchup. But as we were just talking about running backs, guys, so another guy I had above James Robinson this week, I even have him above Devin Singletary, David Johnson, those guys I mentioned, is Jerick McKinnon. Now, Raheem Mostert is going to be out. It looks like he's going on IR. I'm not clear if it's the 3-week IR or a full, season. Either way, Jerick McKinnon for the next 3 weeks, he's essentially becoming a more valuable back in fantasy this year than Raheem Mostert has been overall. When he is the guy, Jeff Wilson is the guy you can pick up. I'm going to go after him in one of my leagues, most likely. He's going to be the backup dude. We saw how they utilized him when Raheem Mostert was out last time. Luckily, we kind of already know the blueprint here, right? Raheem Mostert out, Jerick McKinnon in, Jeff Wilson pick up on your bench. Could be an interesting flex if you need him for really, really deep flex play, right? I wouldn't go out of my way for that. But, yeah, I mean, you could go with that. Jerick McKinnon, I like that. Again, we'll talk about the matchups because this is going to be a tough matchup. But 49ers they invest volume into the run game. Now, it changed a little bit this week. There was more passing involved. I didn't put the full stats of Jimmy here. Apologies. It was like late. The only team I didn't get to the only guy I didn't get to in here. But Jimmy did put up 23 points this week. Had a really strong game for the first time in a while, it seemed like. Deebo Samuel, really early on, was like 4 for 4 for 45 and a touch. So they looked at him early. He's somewhat touchdown dependent, but he's really not. I mean, it's still 9 fantasy points essentially right here, even without the touchdown. Ayuk, 3 for 2, 12 yards and a touch. That is a little less pleasing to me when I look at that. That's really low volume for Brandon Ayuk. And I thought that might happen. We talked about this when Jimmy Garoppolo would come back. We knew his rapport with Deebo. And as long as Jimmy's in, Deebo should be a touchdown kind of guy, 15-point kind of guy a week to that degree. Ayuk might have a down week until they get a little more rapport. Unfortunately, Ayuk's value is much higher with CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins at quarterback, weirdly enough. So, again, we don't really need to look at matchups because the only matchup here that's interesting to me is the 12th at quarterback. And realistically, that just means that I think Cam can pass the ball more this week than he's been able to do in previous weeks. but not by much. I mean, it's going to be decent, but it's not going to be great. By the way, if Richard Sherman's back, that's not the case. So I don't think he is. I don't even think he's close to being back. But Jason Verrett playing at a Pro Bowl level if he's healthy. They are going to get Emmanuel Moseley back. And while I did hear some people talk about Emmanuel Moseley this morning on the I get my bagel in the morning and I listen to fantasy for about like 2 minutes, and they mentioned Emmanuel Moseley and how, well, if he's in, it's not a bad play. It's decent. Listen, guys, Emmanuel Moseley got destroyed by DeAndre Hopkins in week 1. Just destroyed. I've seen him get kind of beat by a lot of other players. So I do think that Kendrick Bourne actually might have a really interesting game here. I don't think he's going to have 15 or whatever, but I think he'll get a touchdown. That's my deep sleeper prediction. I'm going to throw a couple dollars on a bet on him, prop bet, for Kendrick Bourne to get a touchdown. But I'm only comfortable in my lineups. Let me just be clear here. Deebo Samuel, you can start him. I'm not comfortable with the others. Kittle, you're going to start. No analysis needed. He's a stud number 1 tight end in the league right now, essentially, when he's healthy. I have him at number 2 on my list under Travis Kelce. You can make the argument for number 1, but the defense is tough, which is the only reason why I have him at number 2. Cam Newton, in my opinion, I really like him again this week. I was big on him last week, and he really flailed. I'm not as high as to say he's going to be a top 5 pick by any means. So I have him on, so when I look at Cam Newton on my rankings, guys, he's number 12 on the list. So not overly amazing, but he's a starter. All right, he's a starter this week. And I think you can put him in your lineup. He's a QB1 in my opinion, and you roll with him as long as you can, especially with this all happening. Patriots are going to have to get something done. And so I think he's going to have to get some more done with his legs this week. And granted, he had a really rough week passing, but again, 10 for 76 in the touch. As long as he can incorporate the run game, Cam is going to be valuable for you. So I don't think he's going to be a top 8 option this week, but I think I have him at 12. I think he could be a little lower when my final rankings come out, when it's all said and done. I actually have Minshew under him, Burrow, Bridgewater, and Roethlisberger that I am really debating just throwing right above him and dropping him down to, that would be around 16. It is a really tough matchup, but at the same time, who knows? The New England defense is much tougher, and they could get a lot of turnovers on Jimmy, which is where I'm expecting it. And then that could be easy touchdowns for the Patriots. So I'm thinking trends that could be in favor of Cam Newton this week, and that could be the one, right? So I'm not going to guarantee that, but I think a minimum value that he'll get some things going. I think New England's defense, in my opinion, is going to have a better chance to play much better against San Francisco than San Francisco is going to be able to play against New England. That all being said, I do not trust the running backs this week. James White is the only consistent one that you can kind of go, and he'll get your receptions. So PPR, James White's a good flex option. Or if you have to use him as an RB2, he's a deep RB2 play. I'm not touching anyone else from the running backs, even Damian Harris. Damian Harris is just too Sony Michel-like, and in my opinion, not even as good as Sony Michel when it's all said and done. I don't know if I'm wrong or right on that, but that's my personal opinion. I mean, this is tough, man. I thought maybe with Cam back, Julian was going to have a bigger game. The reality is, guys, you can't trust the receivers for the Patriots no matter what. There are going to be weeks they go off and you're going to be mad because they're on your bench, but no doubt about it, this is the more common theme that we're going to see from wide receivers in New England this year with Cam Newton as of right now. You might see 1 or 2 go off, but don't be surprised if Damiere Byrd starts to outproduce Julian Edelman. I mean, 4 for 6, 4 targets for Damiere Byrd, 6 for Edelman. Damiere Byrd had 1 more catch for 30 more yards. So I just don't trust it, guys. It's not where I would want to put my money into it this week. Not at all. I trust Jerick McKinnon more than I trust these running backs. Deebo Samuel I like. I don't trust the wide receivers. I'm really going to try to fade, if I can, anyone from this game. I would start Cam Newton and start Jerick McKinnon and Kittle. And maybe Deebo Samuel. If you have Deebo as like your number 2 or number 3, like I have him as like a number 2 right now, so I'm going to start him. But I think Deebo, McKinnon, Cam, James White, and Kittle. I think you can definitely roll potentially with New England's defense, but just be mindful, dude. Kittle has been shredding people last couple of weeks, and if Jimmy can hook up with him, that could get hot, but I don't think it's going to happen that way. Oh, by the way, I don't think Jimmy's going to get 23 points. He'll come back to earth this week, no doubt about it. I'm not going to tell you to go out and go Jimmy Garoppolo. I never liked him. And oh, by the way, just to put this on top of that, This is the revenge game, if you will, in a way. Bill Belichick going up against his former quarterback and Jimmy Garoppolo. Jimmy's going to want to outshow Bill Belichick and that team and say, hey, listen, I could have been your quarterback right now, blah, blah, blah. So I think the revenge game could be intriguing. It could make it a really interesting matchup for Jimmy to do pretty well. Who knows? This is what I'll say. I'm not sniffing him at all in league long or in league matchups, right? I'm only potentially looking at him in a showdown matchup or a primetime doubleheader. So you had the Sunday night, Monday night game, or the 4 o'clock games, rather, the afternoon games. Maybe I would take a deep flyer on him and Kittle. And I'm assuming his value is going to be a lot cheaper than most of the ones in that window. Let's see here. We had, Minshew, Justin Herbert will be more money. Russell Wilson and Kyler Murray will be more money, right? So he's going to be the cheapest option in that afternoon DFS lineup. Maybe there is where I put Jimmy Garoppolo in, save the value, get Kittle in my lineup, and maybe go with like a James White as another flex option or running back, or whatever you want to do. And then I would really invest in the other teams. I would try to stay away from this team in that, but maybe if you want to go Jimmy and Kittle, it's a risky play because there are just way too many good quarterbacks here. I would probably go Minshew than I would over Jimmy, but he's probably going to be the cheapest option in the afternoon tournament classic style games, okay? So that's the only way I would look at Jimmy. Outside of that, in normal matchups, again, Jerick McKinnon, you start him. Deebo Samuel, I like him this week. Kittle, you start. Cam Newton, I do like the matchup here for him. I think the pass game gets going a little bit more, but I think that really has to do with James White. I like him a lot. I'm afraid to go with any of these receivers. They just are not showing enough right now. We have one more in the afternoon game here, guys. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs go up against the Denver Broncos. Now, the Chiefs are the Chiefs. I mean, it's hard to... I don't want to analyze the people that... Oh, and by the way, I don't have Le'Veon Bell here because there's no points from last week, but obviously he's in the mix here this week, so we'll talk about him. But let's be real. I'm not going to talk to you about Patrick Mahomes. You're going to start Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to talk to you about Tyreek Hill. I will a little bit, but I'm not going to talk to you about Travis Kelce. You're starting Travis Kelce. Most likely, even with a down week, and let's be real, Tyreek Hill had a down week because he was being shadowed by Tre'Davious White. That's not going to be the same situation this week. Even though Broncos defense is a little bit better, they're not as good to go up against this team right now, in my opinion. They'll play it decent, but they're not going to be... Broncos are more of a good football team than they are a fantasy team, if that makes sense. So I do think that even in spite of a tough down week with Tyreek Hill and whatever, he's going to bounce back. You don't not start him, right? I'll be hard-pressed to start any of the other wide receivers. I'll tell you that much. At the end of the day, Broncos are decent against wide receivers, so it's not like they're just going to, fire all over them. But Mecole Hardman, Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, it's all just too unpredictable, right? So for me personally, I'm staying away from that. Tyreek Hill is my starter. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Now, again, I believe what some people have said about Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell. Let's talk about this, obviously, we need to. That Darrell Williams is the one more affected by this whole thing than CEH is. I think Le'Veon Bell and Clyde Edwards-Helaire are going to be used very, very much as a 1A, 1B kind of combination. I do also think you're going to see Le'Veon Bell lining up at wide receiver more in this offense. Don't be surprised to see it. He's been able to do that. He should have been doing that for much longer than anyone was utilizing him. We saw that in Pittsburgh where he had 86 receptions for 800 yards in 1 year, that they lined him up in the slot and they lined him up at receiver. Well, this is the kind of team we just talked about. After Tyreek, there really is a need for targets at wide receiver. Why don't you throw Le'Veon Bell there? I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm not going to be as low on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I just don't believe he's going to put up 161 yards every week. I think he's going to go back down. He's going to be a little bit more of an RB2, low end, more of a mid-range RB2 instead of a RB1 now. And it's okay. It's all right. It's not that big. It's not crazy. If you relied on him and you don't have an RB2, then yeah, maybe you're in a little trouble. But I still think he's going to produce. I don't think you trade him. I think some people ask me, like, should I trade him? I'm like, no. Just because Le'Veon's there. Listen, Le'Veon could be the guy that's the backup, and he's the guy that has less value, and they still stick with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Who knows? The reality is that he needs to come in, learn the offense, do this. He's going to be buried on the depth chart. He'll be number 2, but he's going to take over Darren Williams' job. So think 6 for 26, touch, maybe more receptions his way a little bit. gets more involved in that end. I do like both. But this week, it's tough. 32nd against the run. They need to get it done against the pass this week. I don't love the matchup, but Buffalo was pretty stingy against the running backs too, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire went off. Now, in terms of both of their overall running back production, I think it's going to be fine. Clyde Edwards-Helaire production by himself is where I have an issue. It's going to be a downgrade for me a little bit, but I need to see how the dynamic's going to be, and real quick before I really decide, oh, he's down. We just don't know. We really just don't know at this very moment. Go with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Throw him in your RB2 set or RB3, or your flex spot or whatever. I think you'll be okay with him this week. Well, maybe not this week, but I think you'll be okay with him moving forward. This week is a tough week, though, man. I am really down on the running backs. I mean, this is the one area that I just don't think they're going to get as much production. You get some passing game, and I would say, oh, maybe it will be him. 4 for 4, only 8 yards. Trust me, that's going to be Le'Veon Bell territory, and I wouldn't be surprised if Bell had the touchdown this week and kind of vultured it from that perspective. So be mindful of that. This could be a more even matchup, a little, again, another divisional matchup. Didn't even notice that until now. But it could be a little bit more of a sloppy defensive battle here, considering that, yeah, the Broncos are really stingy on defense, but they're not great offensively. Philip Lindsay, I don't know if Melvin Gordon will be back, but Philip Lindsay has an interesting matchup, but it's the Chiefs. And then tight end, Broncos, Noah Fant is a guy who I want to talk about. He's back this week, supposedly, and if he's back, I do like Noah Fant this week. He'll be a top 8 option for me, even against the Chiefs. Drew Lock has really made Noah Fant look really good this year as a top 8, top 6 even tight end, at the beginning of the season. So if I had to choose one guy on the Broncos, even though Philip Lindsay has the better matchup, now Melvin Gordon's going, that's different. There's going to be discipline. I don't know when that will be. I don't know if the Broncos are going to actually legitimately give him discipline on their end and whatever. I have to assume that maybe that's not the case and Melvin Gordon will be back. And if he is back, then absolutely Melvin Gordon is a top 10 option in my opinion. I don't love Drew Lock this week. It's still a tough matchup against the Chiefs. I think he'll get some things going, but he's been super sloppy. They won last week 18-12, but I mean, listen, 189 yards, 2 picks. Didn't do much. 3 points, 41%, 41.67% pass efficiency, pass completion percentage. So that's not exactly what you want to see from your starting quarterback. But Noah Fant should be back. That should help. Judy, not the greatest. But hey, guys, Tim Patrick, before he got hurt, had a decent game here. Philip Lindsay had a solid game, 23 for 101 on his end. Did rush for over 100 yards. That was good to see. So if he is starting, then you can feel comfortable starting him as RB3. But I'm going to tell you, don't get too excited if Melvin Gordon can't go and Philip Lindsay is your running back and you're starting him at your like RB2. Because he always tends to underproduce. He's even with this yardage, he seems very touchdown dependent for big points, and it never seems to happen. He'll get you the yards, he'll get you 10 points, but he'll once in a while have like a 20-point game. I just don't see that happening against the Chiefs, though. Outside of that, I'm really staying away from Jerry Jeudy right now until Locke gets his together and they get more in sync. Tim Patrick, I think he got banged up. I don't know if he's in. I told Matt I liked him a couple of weeks ago, and he produced. Again, this was a couple of weeks ago when the game got delayed. So this was the matchup that I was saying, I like Tim Patrick again in this matchup. I think he's going to be a legitimate potential option to pick up. 8 targets, guys, 4 catches, 101 yards. Last 2 games Broncos played, guys producing. Keep that in mind moving forward. Jerry Jeudy is the sexier name on the team. And if Drew Lock even looks like a competent quarterback, it could be Tim Patrick that's going to be the sneaky play from the Denver Broncos. So, with that all being said, though, I understand, very tough this week in particular. I don't know if it's going to happen here. So I'm not high on him, but I do think for future waiver wire addition, I think he's a pretty sneaky play, a sneaky pickup if he's still on your waiver wire. So for this game, just to recap, we got Patrick Mahomes, we got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, we have Le'Veon Bell, who I do think is going to have a decent game. I think he'll get like a receiving touchdown or something. Travis Kelce, you're going to start him, right? And on the Broncos side, Chiefs defense is a pretty decent start this week. I know they get Noah Fant back and they might have Melvin Gordon back. If they get their full lineup back, I'd be a little more hesitant. But if there's no Melvin Gordon and Drew Lock looks the same, this could be a good game for the Chiefs. But it is divisional. It never seems to truly go that way until until it's non-divisional. It always seems like the divisional games kind of just go way off script on what they should be from game flow. So just be mindful of that. You can start the Chiefs defense. You're probably going to if you have them, but they might be a little tougher matchup this week. Finally, we are here in the night matchups here. The primetime matchups, the Sunday night matchup first. We have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady against the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I'm not going to go into my rant from the earlier episode about how the Bucs and Green Bay Packers played that second half and screwed so many people off in fantasy for playing basically a half of football. But listen, you can't blame the Buccaneers on their end. They were the dominant ones. Their defense were stud. The running back, Ronald Jones playing a beast. He was a top 10 option on my list last week on my rankings. So you can't blame them. You blame Green Bay. You blame, the Packers for the lack of production in this matchup. This was the points, essentially, that Tom Brady had at halftime. Okay? Oh, and by the way, so was this. It was beyond ridiculous how this game flow was. It was super frustrating if you had multiple guys in it, and I get it. I think this is going to be a bounce back week. The Raiders are pretty stingy in certain areas, but I will say this. They are not at quarterback and they are not at running back. So for me, Ronald Jones, you fire him up again as a top 10 tight end or top 10 running back. I don't give it rather if Leonard Fournette is back. I don't care. Ronald Jones is going to be a top 10 option this week. He's going to get I think the more and more he does this, the more volume I think he's going to inherit. And listen, Bruce Arians has been a Ronald Jones guy since day one, even when they signed Leonard Fournette. He was like, Rojo is our guy. Ronald Jones is our guy. Okay, now he's proving it, and he's productive when he gets the volume. That's all you need them to see to potentially have a top 12 running back to roll with for this year. And Leonard Fournette's going to eat into things, no doubt about it, if he comes back. But I do think that Ronald Jones, the volume, the potential, the opportunities, they're going to be here in this night game. And I think the way they played last week, good defense and run game, that's a recipe for success in today's NFL still. Guess what? Tampa Bay can do that. And if they can with Ronald Jones, they're going to. So I think he's going to have another big week this week. You fire him up again. If Leonard Fournette's back, you curb your excitement, but I still think he's going to do well. Tom Brady, I think, has a bounce back game. He's going up against a team that's getting up the 9th most points to quarterbacks. It should be somewhat of a shootout to a degree, or it should be a dominant performance, which I'm hoping it's not like the Green Bay dominant performance against the Raiders. I say that because of, the lack of production in the second half could really screw fantasy value. So with all that being said, though, I am all in on Tom Brady this week. Unless you have like Russell Wilson or Kyler Murray or some of those top guys. He's like a top 6, top 5 fantasy option for me this week. I personally have Russell Wilson, so I'm not rolling with Tom. But Ronald Jones you roll with. Chris Godwin, I think he'll have a bounce back week. Again, 7 targets. That was like before the half. So if the game script, they all got taken out so they didn't get hurt. So most likely they're going to play a full game this week. I would expect his numbers to go up. Mike Evans, I would expect his numbers to go up, but could be a tough one if he's playing Damon Arnett. I don't know if he's back or if he's been back. If he's in, it could be a tougher matchup for Mike Evans. Listen, guys, Mike Evans is going to have these weeks where he completely craps the bed and then he completely blows up. Godwin's a more consistent guy, in my opinion. I think he's going to be more, consistently 12-plus fantasy points usually, unless game script, kind of dictates that, which it did this week. But for the most part, Godwin's the guy I like over Mike Evans. You're going to see him in my rankings in particular. Pretty much Godwin's going to be over Evans almost every week, depending on the matchup and depending on who they're going up against. So, with that being said, there is another pass catcher that kind of came into the fold finally, after weeks of trying to figure out if he was going to be here or not, if he was going to become a big player on this team. Rob Gronkowski, guys, 8 for 5, 70. I think it was a game to see this. Sorry, 8 for 5, 78 yards, and a touchdown for Rob Gronkowski. And listen, guys, I think this is the time you pick him up. If he's on your waiver wire, you pick him up. It wasn't just, I finally the script dictated it. No, like Tom really did target him heavily. In that little span when they had these, and there were some amazing catches by Gronk. Obviously, the touchdown was fantastic. So Gronk looked the best I've seen him this year. And I think he could be very well picked up in any league right now, especially with O.J. Howard out. Now he's the kind of guy, Cameron Brate, not really involved with Tom Brady. So 8 targets compared to 1 for Cameron Brate. I'll take Rob Gronkowski all day. He could be a top 12 fantasy tight end for you this weekend, potentially. Not going to guarantee that, but I think he'll be much more involved this weekend. And again, tough matchup here. But I do think that, if Tom Brady can go off, if the running game get going, wide receivers get going, it will open up some things for Tom. So I do think it's going to help. You're kind of going up against some tough linebackers to a degree there in Las Vegas, but they're beatable. And I think Rob and Tom, if they're in sync, you like that combination. On the other side of things, Derek Carr, we talked about him as a hit it, pick him up, put him in, not put him in your line, so pick him up, keep him on your team. He's going to be valuable for you for the next couple of weeks. This is one of those weeks that I'm a little more hesitant, though. Tampa Bay just destroyed Aaron Rodgers last week, and I mean destroyed him with Devontae Adams back and kind of the full cast back to a degree, and it did not look good. I am a little hesitant about that this week as well. I picked up Derek Carr in my one league. I'm going to start Gardner Minshew over him in my league that I have those two. And as you can see, if I have Gardner Minshew, there's a reason why I have Derek Carr as my second. So if you have other guys who are more legit, go with them. Don't even try to play cute with this. This will not be as much of a shootout as I think you're going to see. This Tampa Bay defense is for real. On the other side of things, Henry Ruggs could have a down week. I think he could have a big play here or there. But I'm not gonna really go out of my way to start them. Josh Jacobs, tough matchup against Buccaneers. Listen, if you want to start him, go for it. I actually would see if I can maybe sit Josh Jacobs this week. If you have depth, if you don't have like a clear-cut running back who will get the volume below him, then go with Josh Jacobs this week. Even a tough matchup, he could get some things done. Aaron Jones did score, so he did get 11 points. That game just got out of hand really quickly. So if the Raiders can get on the board quickly, that could be Josh Jacobs' territory, no doubt about it. I don't like the tight ends, but I don't like the wide receivers, but I do like the tight end for the Raiders. Darren Waller, top 5 option with some of the buys this week and how everything's kind of shaking out. He's a top 4, top 5 option against the Buccaneers defense. It's the weakest position for them to a degree. Tanyan kind of got shut down again. Everyone got shut down last week. But listen, I think we saw Jimmy Graham do pretty well against this team in the Thursday night Bears-Buccaneers matchup. So you're going to start Darren Waller if you can. And Josh Jacobs, RB3 this week. It's a tough one. It's a tough matchup for him. Oops, sorry. One more. It really is. 24th against the run. Buccaneers are 28th against the pass. I'm probably sitting Derek Carr. I'm probably going to try to see if I have a better option than Josh Jacobs. And if not, do what you got to do, man. Roll with him. Don't get fancy. Don't do like Devontae Freeman over Josh Jacobs. All right, take the chance on Josh Jacobs. It's much more. I mean, we don't know what will happen to Devontae Freeman. I mean, Washington's defense could shut them down, or Philly's defense could shut them down, right? Thursday night matchup. So things like that, you don't want to do that, right? Josh Jacobs or Antonio Gibson. I'm going to start Josh Jacobs. Even Gibson in a good matchup, I probably would roll with Josh Jacobs in that situation until I know that Gibson's going to get more volume. So things like that, where it's like a huge question mark. Now, if you want to say DeAndre Swift over Josh Jacobs, that would be the one where I'd be like, against conventional wisdom, go for it. Try it out. If you are a gambler, if you're a risk taker, right? If you're more conservative, again, stick with Josh Jacobs. And then finally, to end the week, we have the Chicago Bears, one of the conference leading Chicago Bears. I mean, they're one of the best teams in the NFL right now, based on record, against the Los Angeles Rams, the other LA team. And this is going to be, I don't know. I'm not as excited about this Monday night matchup as I usually am. I think it will be a good defensive battle. And I say this because of this particular reason. Not much green on this page, only against tight ends for the Rams. And we already know what the Rams situation is with Tyler Higbee and Gerald Everett. We'll talk about them because, God, they've been super annoying for me this year. And I'm sure for a lot of you. But let's go with the Chicago Bears first, the visiting team. Nick Foles, he's going to go back in the matchup here where it's pretty stingy against the quarterbacks in the Los Angeles Rams. They have Jalen Ramsey and company. I don't trust that to a degree here, guys. It's going to be a tough one for Foles. He might get some things going here, but it's not exactly the matchup that I'm going to go and throw Nick Foles in. I'm fading him out this week on my end. David Montgomery is starting to crash down the earth here, people. Against good defenses, this is what he's going to do. 11.7 is not bad, but 19 for 58 yards, 5 targets, 4 receptions for 39 yards. Not bad, not great. That's kind of what David Montgomery is. He becomes touchdown dependent on that point. And I think this could be a time where it's going to be a little tough to do that against this Rams defense. Especially if they get behind, by the way. And I think they could in this game. I think the Rams will have a bounce back week, and I'll tell you why in a minute. That all being said, Allen Robinson, really down week. I mean, dude, this is a tough matchup. I think he has another down week. I had him really ranked low last week. I had him as a faller, which essentially means that he was going to underproduce severely on what was being projected, and he did. I think that could be the case this week. 9 targets, but only 7 points. That doesn't scream excitement for me, especially when you're going up against the team that's giving up the fewest points to wide receivers in the Los Angeles Rams. So I think when you're looking at this team this week, you kind of have to say, all right, I need to phase out the Bears a little bit here, unless I'm doing some DraftKings stuff. If you need to start anyone on this matchup, I would maybe go with Jimmy Graham. Only Cole Kmet, 2 out of 2 for 20 yards and a touchdown. Stole the production last week from Jimmy Graham, who in a full point PPR had 8 points, but in a half point, 5.9. Not what you want to see here. So I am very disheartened to go after and try to put him in this lineup here this week. It's tough. It really is. You know, you look at the Bears, the Rams are 15th against tight ends. It's not terrible, but if Cole Kmet now all of a sudden starts getting involved, that could be a problem for Jimmy Graham's value, which was really short-lived if that's the case, right? David Montgomery has a decent matchup. I don't like it. I don't like the matchup. I think the Rams are going to put the Bears in their place. I think the Bears defense will keep them in a little bit, but I think the Rams are going to make some things happen this week. And let's talk about them now. The reason I say this is because you look at this and you look at this. 2 weakest spots on this Bears offense, or defense rather, is for wide receivers, or tight ends rather, and running backs. We've seen the running backs go, all over the place again. I was rushing this morning, guys, so I don't have the stats for Henderson, but 9.2, 3.7. The running backs it's a mess right now in Los Angeles. I just don't know who to recommend to you guys each week. Every week it seems like, oh, this guy could be this, and this guy could be this. Oh, and by the way, Cam Akers is now said to potentially get more. Oh, no, that was last week. So we don't know what's going to happen. Cam Akers was supposed to be a guy last week, didn't get a carry. Then it was Darrell Henderson. And then Malcolm Brown's supposed to be a guy, but Darrell Henderson ends up being the guy. I don't know what to think of this team. I'm going to try to phase out running backs if I can. It's not a good matchup here. To be honest with you, I'm trying to fade as many people in this game as I can this week. I don't think it's going to be a sexy fantasy game. I think Tyler Higbee could have a good game, but Gerald Everett could take it away from him. So I'm going to... I don't know. I can't even give you a recommendation on the running backs or tight ends for the Rams because I really just have no clue how Sean McVay is going to run this offense. No idea. So I think at the end of the day, I'm just going to try to go. I have Tanyan over Higbee. I'm going to try to go for him. If you have to start one, start Tyler Higbee. I think he's the better tight end pass catcher out of the two. And then in terms of wide receiver, it's a really tough matchup. But I do like, if I was going to choose one of these two guys, Robert Woods would be the guy that I'm liking more of a Cooper Kupp. They just seem super out of sync this week. Cooper and Jared Goff. I wonder if that changes and maybe makes him have a good game this week. But I'm not sure, man. I'm very hesitant about that. So if I had to give my tip my hat, I've been big on Woods over him, mainly because he's getting those rushing attempts too, and they've actually been able to get some things done with that jet sweep. So I'm cool with that. Tyler Higbee, I'm going to take a chance on in DFS, but I'm not going to feel happy about it at all. I mean, sure, go with Darrell Henderson if you want, but most likely it'll be like a Cam Akers week or some bull like that. So just be mindful of that when you're looking into that. And then Jared Goff, 14.92 fantasy points last week. Tough matchup this week. I'm probably going to sit Goff. I don't like him this week. Honestly, guys, the only guy I see that I like from this matchup is maybe Jimmy Graham and Tyler Higbee. I actually think the best starts in this matchup is the defenses. How do you like that? Must starts in this matchup. Rams defense, Bears defense. Boom. Tyler Higbee has a better shot of doing better, having a decent day than Jimmy Graham. Robert Woods, I think, is going to outproduce Allen Robinson potentially. And David Montgomery, I think, will have a decent game. I think if you're going to start one of the running backs in this game in particular, I think you go with David Montgomery since, of course, there's less competition for that. Other than that, man, yeah, go with the defenses. Phase out the quarterbacks in this matchup. You don't want them on your team this week. They're not going to produce against these tough defenses.